I'm Kareem, and I'm here with Chuck R., and we are two of the co-founders of Open Source Defense. The following is a conversation with David Hahn Jr., the founder of Canine Defense Technologies. Canine Defense makes drones for defense professionals and serious civilians. We had an echo in the first few minutes, but stick with it. We fix it after that, and David's insights into drones and civilian defense are really, really interesting. Also, we'd like to remind you to subscribe to this podcast and to the Open Source Defense Substack and X account. And finally, we run Open Source Defense Capital, where we invest in civilian defense startups and the tech that empowers them. So if you are a founder in that space, reach out. We'd love to talk to you. Now, here is our conversation with David. We are here with David Hahn Jr. from Canine Defense. David, thanks for joining.
Oh, thanks for having me, Kareem and Chuck.
Yeah. So what are we calling drones? Are they UAVs? Are they UASs? Are they
It's called
autonomous
drones.
Underwater vehicles? Okay.
I always get nervous.
Yeah.
I feel like too much of a noob if I just call it a drone. I might drop a few UAVs in there, but we can call it drones.
I mean, I'm used to the DoD world of, SUAS, UAV, and then, now there's autonomous air vehicle, but then everyone still calls it drones. It's the easiest way to understand.
Anduril now has AUVs, which are autonomous underwater vehicles, so it's a mess. But you should just say UAVs, autonomous vehicles or systems are where the V's and the S's come from, just so people know.
Yep.
Okay, drones it is.
Okay, that makes it easy. I was reading back through your Twitter earlier today, or your X, excuse me, and there was this Naval Ravikant retweet about this idea of like drone proliferation and mutually assured destruction. I was curious what you think about that. So the one thing we talk about a lot in like the OST newsletter and stuff is this idea of the benefits of technology accruing to defenders rather than attackers. So this idea that like you are kind of advantaged more or faster as technology develops for defensive uses rather than offensive uses, which is good, I guess. Like that contributes to, peace, stability, etc. There are a couple exceptions to that dynamic. So like nuclear weapons are probably the best example of something that a technology that like accrues pretty much only to attacking uses rather than defensive uses. Where do you think drones fit in here? Like, are drones another exception, or is the unit cost of a defensive use going to be lower than the unit cost of an offensive use going forward? Like, where do you think that offense defense balance lands with drones?
I think that drones are closer to nuclear weapons in the sense that, like, maybe this will change, but at least in the current landscape, defending against drones are so much more expensive than attacking with drones. And as we have conversations with drone swarms, the economics of it, like, it's always so much more expensive to shoot the drone down than to deploy it, like be on the attacking side. And in some ways, I feel like that if a swarm's already coming after you, it's already too late, right? It's like when nukes are starting to go off, it's already too late. You can't argue against, you can't debate for peace without the more offensive solution in the economics of warfare. As in, like, it's got to be so much more.
All right, technical difficulties. We had an echo. David, you were saying.
Yeah, so basically, I think that drones are closer to nuclear weapons in the sense that as we talk about drone swarms, defending against the drone is so much more expensive and complicated than attacking with it. So the ultimate like end all be all solution with drones is production rate and then also like mutually assured destruction. That's what I personally believe. That's unless there's some completely revolutionary counter drone system where it completely breaks the economics of it. But I think ultimately economics is the determining factor of how warfare, evolves and shifts.
Do you see that counter drone system on the horizon? I know people are playing with like machine guns, lasers, nets, anti-drone drones. Nobody has really cracked it yet. Where is that going?
I think killing drones, my personal opinion is I think killing drones is kind of a solved solution. It's more of the gaps in detection. And because, we figured out, I mean, if you look at like even Iron Dome, we figured out to kill even extremely fast moving projectiles. Like, kinetically engaging, like, and terminal guidance systems are like pretty well understood and pretty well adapted. But it's again a cost thing on, okay, deploying these systems are expensive. Even if you have lasers, it's pretty fragile. It takes a lot of energy to deploy out in the field. So it's like, what can you get to the actual like conflict zone? What can you deploy? How much does it cost? And we can kill all these threats, but can you detect them in time? And in many ways, I think going back to, is this, should we treat drones like with mutually assured destruction, or will counter drone systems catch up? Like, I think that again, the threat side is always going to be ahead, because if you look at Ukraine, they do develop all these counter drone systems, but like by the day, they build all these hacks like in like bunker drone labs, and I don't know how you could catch up to that in time.
I think if we take a U.S. centric, take your point of like this
Yeah.
is really an economics problem, and we take a very selfish U.S. centric view, I'm pretty comfortable with the fact that the delta between offense and defense is pretty tight right now. So swarm v swarm is like a pretty practical defense if you have the money to counter any swarm cloud with your own swarm cloud. The the logic for tracking and intercepting is kind of there, and like I say,
Yeah.
that arms race is going to stay tight. What's more interesting is like we're not there yet, right? We're obviously getting ahead of ourselves, but the shocking thing about Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, is just this forced adaptability to see, well, what can we do and how do we do this guerrilla warfare, patching together piece by piece. They're basically giving us the roadmap for what's effective and what's not. I read an Instagram post today that showed like the 9 different use cases of drones in Ukraine specifically, and they showed the 9 or 10 different ways that they are deploying these for specific missions. So what are you seeing there? We're all watching as technologists what's going on in Ukraine. What have you picked up in the drone world?
In regards to Ukraine specifically,
Yeah, like what they're doing, how they're developing things, like what surprised you, what's happening?
I would say like what surprised me is um how far it's escalated in like in I hate to say it, but almost like how how much like janky solutions have been deployed and how well they work. Like like
It's
and then
exactly.
how well like no, how badly like more Western systems operate in these very rough environments. As in like, if you look at the US defense drone industry, there's a lot of like network defense and things like that. And then I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of Ukrainians. They're going with like analog VTXs and like very basic, robust, old communication standards that we basically no longer use. And it uses chipsets that are only made in China because no one else makes them anymore. And they prefer that. And it's just, I think that there's a lot of um, like we have to just completely rethink the way um, I mean, I think what we saw is like basically a new generation of warfare just getting mapped out in real time. I guess that's the best way to put it. It's hard to put an exact reaction to it, but just shock and awe, I guess, just and fascination, you know.
Yeah, it was surprising how, like you said, how kind of janky the whole thing was strung together, like DJIs with manual release. There's an extra button on couple extra buttons on the DJI controller, and just like wiring that into a very simple release mechanism to just eyeball mortars, down into the sunroof of SUVs or military vehicles. It's kind of bananas. So it is shocking that primitive stuff has worked so well, and you see the countermeasures are just simple, tarps and simple wires and frameworks around vehicles to keep drones from hitting them.
The
But I
cope
think,
cages.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it seems recently, so I mean, we can extrapolate from what we're seeing, and we understand now that okay, so drones are going to have much more interesting payload departments. They're going to have payload bays and launch mechanisms. Um, this evolution is very clear. So it's been very interesting. I'm sure you've been thinking about kind of what for your own kind of drone mission, what you're going to have to change or whatnot.
And also, I mean, there is, I mean, in the objective perspective too, there has been like my own skepticism on how much will this translate to the kind of, both domestic and international conflicts on like larger, global powers. Like, how will they utilize drones? I personally don't think it's going to be exactly like Ukraine, in the sense that Ukraine and both Russia have economic constraints, which is why you see these janky solutions. Like, um, in some ways, we learned so much from Ukraine, but in other ways, like, it's just a glimpse on like the only relation to the future is they're using drones, but the exact way warfare is going to look, I don't think we've actually seen that, right?
How would it look if they had 50 times the budget or whatever the delta is to the Pentagon?
I think, like Chuck was saying earlier on the swarm v swarm thing, maybe more like that. I honestly don't know. I think that's why I kind of bring up the mutually assured destruction part. I think it's going to be a lot more deadly, than what we see in Ukraine. It's not going to be like FPV pilot versus FPV pilot. It's going to be like single operator, and then like they have all this intelligence ahead, and then just autonomous systems just swarming in, right? Which is why I mentioned why I think that the ultimate trend with drones is once you secure to production, it's going to be like this um, kind of negotiation tool, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What has been, you mentioned um, the kind of like cat and mouse game with countermeasures between Russia and Ukraine, and how countermeasures have been like pretty easily defeated with just like scrappy or infield modifications. What's kind of the history? What's the latest in uh, counter measures that we see over there?
I think latest in countermeasures is you see them put um, radar reflectors on cheap drones, so it mimics, and then they're putting like Lunenburg lenses. It's like the same kind of. It basically beams back your RF energy really efficiently. So they're mimicking the radar cross section of larger aircraft. Um, Also, I think they're doing a lot of like RF spoofing too, which is like tricking all these drone detectors that there's more drones in the air. And then I even saw some optical spoofing, like IR beacons and stuff like that. So to really fool the drone detection, optical based drone detection. So, um, I mean, it's probably for the counter UAS guys, both developing it and operating. I bet it's pretty frustrating.
Interesting. Just okay, just to play with this like mutually assured destruction idea. Um, trying to think of a devil's advocate. So if you wanted to say, devil's advocate to that, I think what you would say is we're the US, we have oceans on both sides. How is anybody going to get close enough to launch a million drones? Um, what how does that play out? I guess like that probably isn't possible with today's technology, but like what's coming that would make that a viable threat?
I think the scary thing are um, like drones are the assets that you could deploy them close to the U.S. From an adversary perspective. Like I do think it's possible. I mean, um, there's been like Chinese spy ships very close off the uh, U.S. coast, right? So, I mean, imagine if those were secret drone motherships or
Right.
something.
Just like steal
Or
a Carnival Cruise Lines and
yeah.
park it in Tampa. Yeah.
Yeah. Like drones are very easy. Like, if you're carrying huge ballistic missiles like in the Cuban Missile Crisis. I mean, they saw it with spy planes over ships, but I mean, drones are the kind of things where you can have like shipping container drone launchers, right? And like, I'm not saying the probability of that is high. I mean, I doubt China would do something like that, but I'm saying like this is a technology where that's possible. So I guess the risk of that's higher. And also, we've seen like the CCP subsidize drones to like cartels, right under a border, and it's very easy to quickly distribute these systems out to like these guerrilla forces, right? And I think the threat of it is much higher than most other conventional weapon systems in terms of distribution and democratization. But again, that turns into also a benefit of it. Yeah.
Benefit in the sense of kind of assuring peace through
Yeah, so
deterrence.
if we democratize it within the U.S., I mean, I think there's a immense opportunity there. That's what I personally think. Yeah.
Yeah. How does that play out? Yeah, go on that more. So we've been talking about like government use of drones, military use of drones. Bring this to the civilian market. I think the like 2A tie-in and the guns tie-in is, you could think of this along the same lines, but
Yep.
basically individuals being able to project force at a distance, at scale, in a way that has not really been technologically possible before. Um, are we all going to have our own personal drone swarms? What's the
I,
end
d-
game?
I don't think civilians are going to have their own personal drone swarms, but I think what is the possible future, especially in the 2A context, is like distributed ISR. And like if you look at I remember you talking about like gun with Isaac, gun culture, like 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and you see like the transition with comms, and kind of the perspective for a while was like, okay, like after this, you need more larger assets to, go beyond, right? Like for example, airborne ISR was something that we only envisioned like the military having, but drones kind of break that in providing way more intelligence for very low cost. And I think that the future of the 2A space on armed Americans having personal, man portable, like small Mavic style drones that they pull out of their bag or it's clipped on their plate carrier and they get real time ISR. Like that's a very that's going to be distributed very soon if we make the right calls.
Yeah.
It's interesting. There's a little bit of a problem. I mean, that works well, but so for me, the use case I love is just your own kind of guard dog, right? So I
Hmm.
want two inductive chargers on my roof with two response drones, and which I can tie into any of my home security things. And those are what auto launch to go look at what's happening, around a property, respond back, have autonomy to maybe follow somebody to a certain extent. Um, this is all a bit of a drag because the FAA is kind of really crippled the U.S. drone market. Whereas in other countries, especially in China, you don't have these FAA style restrictions of like, oh, by the way, you need a pilot's license for any, like, if it's not line of sight, you need the pilot's license for you to operate a drone. I don't know what they say about autonomous drones sitting on top of my house. I can make the excuse that I can see it, so maybe it is line of sight, although I want full autonomy, right? So how do you see us getting around? We need to innovate, but we need to do
Yeah.
it in spite of the government. How do we do that?
So I think first of all, just like for most people who don't know, I will kind of lay out some of the legal side of it in terms of how we approach it. Quite honestly, you know, legislation is not my strong point. I'm not really sure. I've talked to some people who are actually helping draft these things in Congress, but so like first of all, like actually I don't know if you saw, but we have a company post from like a year ago, which is like we were kind of comparing the how the ATF operates and how the FAA operates. And like where I was kind of splitting apart was that yes, like the FAA has done relatively well in the responsibilities for manned aviation, and I think we objectively most people agree that we do need some kind of a standardized system there. And then they were just kind of the assumed, you know, they're the assumed authority for drones, and much like kind of like the ATF arm brace ban and things like that. The drone registration came in without actually going through the typical legislation process. They just ruled it on a the interim. I think it's called an interim rule, something like that. I don't know the legal terms, but basically, like the FAA is like, oh, we need this, we have this authority. This is going to be a big problem. So they rolled out drone registration, and that should have been a red flag. But where the drone community itself started to really rise up was with the 2018 reauthorization, where they enacted remote ID. And remote ID was basically any drone above 250 grams has to have a transponder that transmits the location of the drone and the controller at any time when it's in operation. And you already see that encroachment. And then now recently on the 20th, the December 20th, the 2018 Reauthorization Act ends, and then the new one's coming in where they're actually allowing more authority for counter drone operations domestically, which wasn't originally allowed. Um, and like these legal restrictions are rolling in, and it was kind of weird to see that the drone community isn't like the 2A community, as in that initially with remote ID, they were very mad about it. Like I think they did some small protests in DC and stuff. But after that, the same people, like the same voices there were like, actually, this is not that bad. And now we see like, more laws coming in. So I am honestly, I don't know what to do about it. I'm worried about it. Like, I
Yes,
think like
yes.
it's very possible we may not see the future of widely distributed drones across for Americans if these laws keep going on. And in many ways, the lawmakers are scared of the drone threat and have no idea what to do. Like, I don't think there is, a power grab moment with drones right now. With most lawmakers, they're just scared, so they're reacting to it. But this will very easily translate into, a federal power grab and uh, a, a platform for, usurping power. So I am concerned about that.
Yeah, I mean, for those of us in the Second Amendment fight personally for the last 45 years, we need to tell our drone friends that the slippery slope is very real.
Yep.
Knee-jerk reactions are really hugely detrimental to the industry. And the perfect example is like we have the repeat of the War of the Worlds broadcast from Orson Welles happening in New Jersey as we speak, right? So there's a hysteria,
Yep.
either real or produced, we're still not sure, about quote unquote drones, right? And my fear, and it's already happened. I think one person in the Jersey legislature said like, okay, we got to stop drone flights, at least temporarily, or whatever. These knee-jerk reactions to kind of complicated events are going to be the death of us. So I really want to tell the drone people to not give an inch, honestly, because on the gun side, we have been demolished since '68 for giving inches that have turned into miles.
And what I'm concerned about the New Jersey situation is, I like no one watches C-SPAN, let's be honest, but I did listen to several hours of like hearings for the drone for their passing, drone regulation, and like the only example they're bringing up between these congressmen are the New Jersey drone situation. And originally, the contention to the bill was okay, like personal privacy violations on tracking private use of drones, right, with these remote ID transmitters. And all of that went out the door because of the New Jersey situation. And I'm already seeing this crazy, precedent being set where I don't think a lot of people would want to keep using drones if the location of the controller and the location of the drone is transmitted at all times. And the stupid thing about that is if you're a bad actor, you just need a pair of wire snips to disable it, right? And you know, like it's
That's
not
classic.
stopping the
Yeah.
bad people. It's a classic actually 2A argument again, you know.
That's very classic.
It's mapping one to one to the two-way space is
Yeah.
terrible.
Yep.
I think that's actually this is a great point because there is a lot of surface area, like kind of attack surface if you did want to restrict drones. And I think probably a lot of people who um, propose or endorse these kinds of restrictions are maybe doing so naively without
Yep.
necessarily like some grand conspiracy to shut down drones. It
Yeah,
is
I don't
just
think so.
like that knee jerk
Mhm.
thing. But I think the New Jersey hysteria is kind of a baby version of what we could experience if there was any sort of like act of violence enabled by a drone or done with a drone. And then also the China thing. I think like there is a big hook if someone, like DJI is the biggest drone manufacturer, super popular. They sell a ton of drones. I think like there is an attack angle for people who want to kind of turn the concerns about China into something that says like, okay, we're going to need to restrict drones generally, um, in a way that intentional or not shuts down innovation in the market.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, I
yeah, go ahead.
the bringing up the DJI thing, you saw the recent DJI push for the DJI ban, and that was I had mixed feelings, which is 80% of drones in the US are basically from DJI. I think about almost 80% are from DJI. I mean, they're the most popular drone in the world. They basically own the global drone market. And yes, there are like DJI does, send valuable sensitive data to the CCP, and they're backed by their government. And we don't want that in the US in one sense. But at the same time, the bills to ban it were pushed by the larger enterprise and defense, drone companies who are not interested in the civilian market. And I would think the right approach would have been an off-ramp strategy, but it's just like a direct, like you said, a reactionary, cut and dry legislation, and like the drone space is kind of suffering from that, which is just um, there's a lot of reaction to it, and actually the industry itself. Once I got in, I realized how small it is. So the influence of the industry is very small, but the reaction is like global, right? So there's just kind of there isn't this good pipeline between industry and legislation and then also the end user. It's kind of just all out there, it feels like.
Yeah, and to the extent that it exists, I mean, one thing I really like about what you're doing is we talk about the civilian defense market, right? And defense tech is very hot right now. Everyone loves Anduril and all those sorts of companies, but like VCs get very, high on themselves for like, wow, we're investing in defense tech. But usually what that actually means is they're investing in companies that arm the government.
Yep.
And, whether you like that or like leaving aside the question of whether that is good or not, or how much of that there should be, there is still really nobody talking about like, well, what about civilians? Right? Like who's building Anduril for civilians? And so I
That's
think,
us.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
that's what's super cool about what you're doing. On the FAA stuff, how much, just to keep ourselves honest, like how much of it, how much of the current state of the market is because of FAA restrictions? Like how much is that kind of the limiting factor versus just like unsolved technological problems, cultural hurdles of just like people not knowing the market enough, just product solutions of like, have people not invented drones that do cool enough stuff yet? Like where are the hurdles in the market, and where does like the FAA rank among them?
Actually, the FAA, frankly, ranks very like so in terms of legislation, like the rules they set are pretty strict, but their enforcement power is extremely like little. So there's probably probably most drone pilots in the US are violating some FAA rule, right? But they have no way to track it and keep track of all that. So I wouldn't say it's very restrictive now, but I'm saying I think the legal risk that it lays down is pretty great for the industry to grow, right? So
Because
like
as a company, you couldn't, like, yeah, a private person can choose to violate the rules, but what you really want is for a company to be able to like build and market a autonomous drone that flies beyond line of sight or that sort of thing. And that is like pretty much just shut down today, right?
yeah, that's pretty much shut down. Yeah. So like let's say, well, on the company side, so like drone companies like us, if we ship a drone to be FAA compliant, you just need that remote ID module
Okay.
on. So that's main restrictions. But if you want to do so, like actually bringing up beyond visual line of sight is a good point. That is completely just there's no way to do it without a ton of paperwork with them. And there's only big companies doing that. Like I'm talking like the Amazon drone delivery or like power line inspection, like autonomy. Like so like that's frustrating that only the enterprise level companies can justify getting waivers for BV loss operations and testing. And that's basically just fizzled out. And before that, I mean, I'm friends with some of the very long term like drone guys, like early ArduPilot days with the Arduinos and when they're hacking Wii controllers to get the IMU out, like the early days, right? And they would tell me all the cool beyond visual line of sight experiments they would do themselves, where it'd be like, oh, like shipping a small box like across like 20 cornfields, and they were doing that at the private level, which is super cool. But you know, that's all been shut down sadly. And a lot what I don't understand is like a lot of people don't. A lot of drone developers are very responsible people. Like all gun owners who are good are responsible, right? They don't go around shooting in the air, but that's kind of what the
Yeah.
FAA treats everyone as.
Yeah.
Right. I want to get back to this on the innovation side, but Kareem, I realize we really haven't let David talk about his company.
Yes. What do you
What are you doing?
What are you doing here?
Yeah. So please go in and explain what it is that your company's doing and what your vision is and mission, et cetera.
Sure. So our core mission is bridging the U.S. defense tech hardware gap for Americans by Americans. So we serve like both civilian government customers. If you're American, we serve you. That's kind of our mission set, and we're hardware first. So like there's a huge push for software in the defense space. I think software is the future. I think the future of defense will be software defined, but there's this clear gap in hardware, in my opinion. So I'm trying to build and fill that gap because if you really look at the total amount of drones operating in the defense space, the total number of different models we have is very low. And I want to focus on the drone space specifically. The reason why we're focused on drones is because I think that drones are the most efficient bodies for software. So like for the evolution of software, drones are one of the best economic platforms to get the most capability out. So that's what really fascinates me about drones. So, you know, we build. I like to say the R&D to product ratio is 10 to 1. So we're always working on 10 things ahead for every one product we launch. Our first public product was Genesis, the tactical utility drone. It's a fully open source, just basic American drone platform. Right? We're starting from there, serving different customers, and we're building in, we're doing some EW stuff, we're doing ISR systems, and then we're doing just conventional just drone airframes and seeing how the market responds and just adapting to it. So we don't have like a clear roadmap. We just build, release it, sell prototypes, and then kind of build out the production as we go. So,
And this has a very, like you said, you're targeting kind of consumer needs here rather than military or enterprise industrial.
yeah, so we only do defense. We do have military customers, which I can't disclose at this time, but then our military customers are unique, which is like, so when I started this company out of high school, and actually, Chuck, it's kind of funny you're here because like my dream after high school, in high school, was like I wanted to work at Andrew. So like I applied for an internship, never got it. So I was like, okay, let's try experimenting building like tactical drone platforms off the shelf. And it started to get actual interest in the defense sector. And I was like, man, I didn't know that there's this big of an interest here. This was like 2020, 2019 or so. So I was really experimenting with these things. And I tried the DoD contracting process, and it didn't go well for a tiny LLC at the time for me. So I was like, I bet there's a direct market, right? And I was surprised to see how many civilians they are who want like more tactical, defense-centered drones, whether it's large landowners or people who want to like just think ahead and experiment with these systems. So by entering that market, it actually helped us win actual sales in the DoD for like smaller units or um, labs doing research who can't justify large purchase orders, like federal purchase orders for the conventional systems. And I realized that there's this really healthy pipeline on we can innovate super fast, serve regular civilians, but also help the guys in the military who need these systems too. So
That's awesome. Well, I can, for people who don't know, I was a relatively early employee at Anduril in 2019 for about 2.5 years. But if you do want that internship now that you've started your own drone company, I could put a good word in. You might do better. But it's
it's
exciting.
too late for that now,
Yeah, I
unfortunately.
imagine you're pretty well on your way. Make a good acquisition though. The cool thing is you're building U.S. drones, which is obviously a huge gap in for military, even for civilians who want things that aren't actively beaming back data to CCP.
Yep.
That should be enough to get you a pretty good runway to keep innovating. So just to switch gears back to kind of the FAA and innovation, because we love to talk about the startups like yours that are innovating and what helps you to innovate and what hurts you. So SLAM is obviously a big thing in the drone world, simultaneous location and mapping for GPS denied environments. So we want autonomy any way we can get it. We want GPS autonomy, via GPS we can get autonomy, but much harder is when you don't have a GPS signal. Now you're doing this kind of mapping, auto driving in 3D space. Do you have any? I haven't kept up, so I don't know where SLAM is in the evolution of drone tech. I also don't know how you get around FAA requirements for having that level of autonomy in indoor spaces or other GPS denied areas. Maybe you could catch us up on what's going on there.
Sure. So, in terms of FAA regulation, like if you operate indoors, it's outside their jurisdiction. It's only outside. So, operating VSLAM indoors, fine. Even if when you operate it outside, so long you have a visual observer, it's okay. There's a VSLAM, like I'm seeing some really cool developments of it, and more and more open source projects really centered around VSLAM. The challenge with it is really it all comes down to this, which is the end user experience, which is that most of the time it's highly experimental. It's a laptop with a serial radio, and then you're communicating with it with the terminal. And I haven't seen any good, maybe outside of Skydio, where the end user experience is like a push of a button, and it's hard. I mean, I've done development that work. I don't do software. We work with software companies, but like we implement SLAM and we're like, wait, so if I'm a person who just wants to turn on the drone and fly it, like how is this going to be implemented? And it's hard. It's a hard problem. And it's kind of frustrating that DJI is really catching up on those things because they have so many drones, distributed out, and they also basically harvest all that data. So they come out with pretty good autonomy solutions baked in. And I would argue that on the software side, the US is way ahead, but on the implementation side, we're behind. And again, also the FAA regulations on you have to have the drone line of sight all the time is really restricting.
How did you decide to uh, do open source hardware? Like, what made you decide to do that?
So what made me decide to do it is that, well, I felt like the hardware based infrastructure for drones is kind of really behind in the US, which is that any moderately good drone platform becomes a proprietary enterprise or defense, airframe. And that was kind of really frustrating for me. And I was like, if we want America to have that edge again, I want to have send something out into the world where people can experiment on and grow on. And I want to see what people do with it. It was more out of like that curiosity, and I wanted to like spark that. I mean, I guess it's gonna be something in 2, 3 years down the line. I'll see if that worked, but that's why I kind of wanted to start from the open source side of it. And also, before I got into drones, I was doing advanced model rocketry. So we're doing like thrust vector controlled with solid rocket motors. And then my dad's the one who inspired me to kind of get into open hardware train. He was like, share it, see what people do with it. And it was really beautiful to see so many people download the file, experiment with it, and then remix it. And I was like, this is how we distribute innovation, right? And we see that a lot with software. We don't see that too much with hardware. And I wanted to kind of contribute to that, really.
Yeah, I mean that makes a ton of sense since it's so early, and really, I mean, we've been talking about the FAA thing. Like, a lot of the most interesting possible uses aren't even explored yet because of those hurdles. Um, it makes sense to be like actually not very opinionated about how people should or can or will use these things. What's kind of the are you seeing early signals about how um, civilians will be using drones in 10 years? I mean, Chuck mentioned like the guard dog idea. There's, rural properties like monitoring acreage. What are you seeing out there? Like, what are the most interesting uses?
So quite frankly, that's where DJI has like captured that space, right? So like most most civilians I've talked to who are buying our drones are because they believe in the mission, but most of the time it's a price thing where they're gonna buy the off-the-shelf drone that just it's the end user experience, right? So in terms of how the civilian drone space can evolve is there needs to be more companies like mine working on this base level hardware where a civilian can buy it, it does what they need to do without them having to dabble with it. And so long that industry grows, I think that there's a space for civilians to start introducing more feature sets they want. But we're not even there yet right now, as just to put it. There isn't a American DJI Mavic, right? Unless you buy a Skydio or something like that, which is like the price discrimination is huge because they're only focused on enterprise and defense.
Is that is the hurdle there like supply chain, manufacturing expertise, et cetera? Is that the hurdle?
Yes, so supply chain is so actually this is an interesting history with drones, which is basically the whole pyramid of the drone industry is built on two major softwares, ArduPilot and PX4, which are completely open source projects. And the devs are still actively growing and advancing that. And then there's a bunch of hardware built under that on these two projects. And basically the whole drone industry was really built on that. And it still is. But as these open hardware came out in kind of the early 2000s to the mid 2000s, the cheapest way to get these hardware made was in China. So China has slowly conquered the drone supply chain, where to build a drone in the US now is like 100% non-Chinese is really, really hard. Like China controls that market. So um, even if you try to build a direct DJI competitor, you're probably just going to use straight off their supply chain right now, right? So that's a big challenge. So like if I'm trying to build a drone with the same capabilities as a DJI in the US, it's going to cost much more, and that's a it's a huge supply chain hurdle.
The just to stay on the tech front here,
Yeah.
in my limited experience, I'm a software guy, but I did have limited experience to hardware at Anduril. The two things that struck me there that pretty much all, you can tell me if there's more than this, but it's like power and propulsion,
Yep.
right? Are the two nuts to crack to make drones more and more interesting. Power in terms of how much energy can you store on board to use the thing, and propulsion like quadcopters, multi blade copters, helicopters, or jet powered, air based systems. Where are we now with that? Would you see any innovations or opportunities or anything you guys are working on to kind of take that power curve or that flight time curve and get it to be more interesting?
I think in terms of propulsion, the biggest thing now is more, so it's called FOC, or field orientation control. So it's basically, instead of square waves, sine wave, very smooth motor controllers. And as that's shrinking down and there's more open source projects off of that, we're going to see a lot more efficient and way smoother flying drones. And in terms of power, um, that's that's really the bottleneck with drones is, your power density. It's hard to build a drone fly more than 40 minutes. I mean, you can, and there's other power systems, but in terms of in the, distribution side, um, there's lithium like metal batteries instead of lithium ion. That's more energy dense, and you can get up to 40% more flight time for the same weight. These are the kind of technologies that I think will really determine the how far the capabilities of drones at a level that civilians can buy will grow into.
Do you see any juice to squeeze out of like prop design? I know Anduril for our Ghost helicopter, which was even 4 years ago, was an amazingly capable um, UAV with a pretty solid flight time, like 15, 20 kilos of lift. Very quiet because it was like subsonic rotors. All that was, innovative. Is there anything left to do with props that maybe we could figure out? Or I know
Yes,
Andrew was playing
I'll
with
just say
like
yes.
jets. Oh, look at
Yeah,
that.
I'll just say yes. Yeah,
Very quickly, he shows that.
yeah. We have some posts on X on it. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Okay. So there's
Oh,
efficiencies you're getting.
yep. Efficiencies, and then the resonance, and um other secret sauce. And then
Somebody
another
analyzed the
thing,
video to get the CAD file to turn it into a CAD file.
Exactly.
is I've been experimenting with this on the R&D side, which is in terms of the kind of going back to the mutually assured destruction thing, like I was like, what's the edge you can gain um, that's distributed for these single systems to be like much more up ahead against counter UAS? One of them is thermal camera um, camouflage, kind of in a way, which is like there are specific materials that really blend in with the ambient air temperature. And from our test, I mean, it can make computer vision software have a very hard time. So those are kind of the stealth side where I think it can get pretty cool with the on the defense side of drones, because we're so focused on defense. We don't do like mapping outside of like military use mapping. So
Cool. And I'll just on this last thing on this little front here, propulsion. Blades are still obviously the dominant force, but if you were to use some sort of air fuel mixture, you could put a different fuel with different density on the drone. There's some sort of petro based fuel. Is there anyone kind of working on that, or is there a path forward where you're using liquid or some other form of combustible fuel?
I think so. I think they're I forgot the exact name, but there's a basically like a VTOL fan drone, basically built around a lawnmower engine the U.S. Army uses a lot, and they're old, but I I do think that, kind of going back to the context for like distributing among civilians, there is a future in like petrol-based drones too. It's like a lot of end users actually don't know how to handle lithium ion, and lithium polymer high density batteries. Well, they expect the DJI style, it's all smart and all built out, and we can't always have that luxury with every product. And I think that kind of the maybe the future with drones is in some ways the kind of the idiot proof, just put petrol in, it does the mission, gets the information you need, like that. I think there's a future there too.
How it, let's keep going on the mutually assured destruction thing. We're
Yeah.
obsessed with the apocalypse.
Kareem
I
is
guess.
obsessed, at least.
How worried? So, on the civilian side, right? Like in a
Yeah.
world where I can buy a drone off the shelf, it does super cool stuff, it's autonomous, et cetera, has payload, high payload. How worried should I be? Like, I think on the one hand, I was thinking about this earlier. Like, on the one hand, you could construct a scary scenario where it's like, wow, anybody who wants to kill me at a distance can do so, like trivially. Um, but then I thought, like, that is actually possible today. Like, anybody who wants to assassinate you, like you know, who has a specific target that they want to kill, could actually do so pretty easily and probably not get caught if it's not too high profile and they are like reasonably competent. So I don't know. I should we be scared? Should we not be scared? What does the brave new world hold for us?
I I mean, I guess that's up to the future. I honestly don't know. Like, I think in some ways, I mean, I've had this debate with friends in the sense that one of the arguments that were interesting is that the technical kind of so the self-regulation on how much technical skill you need to successfully implement and use something, right? So like if there's a bad actor and they want to do something bad with drones, they gotta know at least some level. They have to have some level of technical skill to implement it in an effective way. So in some ways, maybe there is that self-regulation aspect of it. But I don't know how much the end user experience will get be more simplified and universal as this technology advances. I don't. I'm really not sure on that, to be honest. And in another sense, on what happens as this gets cheaper and more accessible, but at the same time, that already happened with DJI drones, and we haven't seen a widespread of like people dropping munitions off of these in the US yet, right? So I guess in all honesty, I can't clearly answer the question until time goes on and
Yeah.
see how people respond with it.
Chuck is just listening quietly, like he's like, I already worked on this at Anduril. We're all dead.
Yeah, my face is already in the whitelist AI database, so like, don't kill this one.
But yeah, I it's one of those things I feel is, I think on paper could be pretty worrisome, but there are a lot of historical parallels where it has actually just gone okay, and it's just been fine despite the lack of particular kind of countermeasures or blocks on bad behavior. And I don't know if that's naive, but I feel like there's actually not much reason to worry, even though on paper you could probably talk yourself into it.
I think there's two sides to it, which is that on near pure adversary level, like when you go to the warfare side, yes, but on the domestic threat side, I mean, there's also like a cost side to this, right? Which is like if there's a bad actor, there's cheaper ways to do more destruction right now. So maybe there's less of a nightmare scenario on the domestic side. I think there is. I've heard that argument before, and I guess I do agree to some extent.
I will say there's been maybe some previews overseas. So like the one technology we haven't talked about, but is interesting, when I was working at Anduril, it was very made clear to me by the U.S. military, is that this idea of HITL, human in the loop. So the military is all go on autonomy and drones and what have you, but they were very adamant that nothing takes action without a human initiating that action. So no kill decisions, no anything of consequence without a human operator saying go. And most of the world powers have kind of been along that path. And I think I know of two exceptions, and that's Turkey and China.
Hmm.
And I believe it was Turkey that years ago, like 2, 3 years ago, did the first autonomous kill
Yep.
of a political rival, where a drone saw its target and acted and terminated that person. So we haven't seen it widespread. Right? What do we know? We don't know half the classified stuff, but the ones that we have seen, I think I don't know if China has tested. I know China has tested that. I don't know if they've
Mhm.
deployed it, but you could see like maybe Israel or in going against Iran, which they've already done phenomenal, mind blowing tech solutions for their problems. Um, I guess that's the question, right? Will we see more of this where autonomy is taken to right through the kill chain? Which I feel like that's the step that are going to get people uncomfortable. Like if it's a human in the loop, it's someone pulling the trigger. It could have been a sniper, it could have been a drone, it could have been a bomb, but somebody took action. Versus we told this autonomous thing what to do, who to look for, and it went and did it, right? So that's the overview window we're waiting for. Uh, and I don't know if you've heard other things, David. You're more plugged in than we are, but that's is my assessment about accurate.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. I have mixed feelings on that, which is like I've heard the debates on both sides for it. And to be honest, the convincing one for me is that it's kind of inevitable in the sense that I think we'll be it may be the future that's normalized, as in we see it as okay, like that's where I go back to the mutually assured destruction thing on that. It becomes, if China does it, the US is going to want to do it in some sense, right? And it becomes a asset on like, okay, it's gonna do its thing, so let's not do it. Like I think I think we will get to that point. That's my personal opinion.
I mean, the human in the loop thing, though, is kind of maybe a distinction without a difference. I mean, the US military has killed like many, many thousands of people probably at this point. Where, like, yes,
But
there was technically a human in the loop, but
it
they
was
were kind
targeted,
of a
right? It
rubber
was like
stamp in practice.
yeah. I mean, I think it's a psychological barrier that people are maybe not ready for because the idea of a missile or cruise missile or more like piece of munitions that's more traditional and someone picking a spot where that's going to be deployed, like it still didn't look at the guy's face and figure out, yeah, that's the guy, right?
Wait, so say
Which
more about the turkey thing. Like a drone was
Yeah,
just loitering, spotted a guy on camera, and was like, "That's the guy," and just killed him.
that was David. You might know that was my understanding.
yeah. So basically, typical kamikaze drones, like it may help spot a target, but you have to designate it and engage. But the turkey thing is like this drone is deployed over this area, and then once they deployed it, it just hunted detected, hunted, and then it engaged without a human enabling it being engaged, basically. So it was pretty controversial. But
Do
in
you
some
know how
sense,
it was? It
yeah,
looking
go ahead.
for his cell phone, or how did it? What was it looking for?
I don't remember the exact detail, but I do know it found a person. I don't know about the political rival part, but I do know it detected a person and engaged it fully autonomously. Like there was no human allowing it.
My
Okay.
impression was that it was like a visual recognition thing, like
Yeah,
not a signal, not a
yeah, it was camera
electronic
based.
signal.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, your whole worldview just changed, Kareem.
Yeah. Well, this was already priced in. This is, who knows the crazy stuff they're doing. Um, well, let's talk more about canine defense before we let you go. Wh- Tell us about like just kind of early history of the business. What was the hardest part?
So hardest part was I guess understanding how broken the federal contracting space is, and I like I wish I built these, like I wish I went directly to civilian space and supported it earlier on. Like I wish I was braver and did that earlier on, to be honest. Um, because it was a painful period on being just straight out of high school and being wanting to work in this space, and then just thinking that, oh, this is the way to support America and get these drones, get as so my whole forte was get as many we maximize the drones per dollar, right, than anyone else. And then I realized that they don't prioritize that in typical federal contracting space. And then I started to, my perspective grew with the company on, man, a lot of Americans do need these capabilities, and I should be kind of broadening it, focusing on defense still, but providing these basic capabilities now. And then another big aspect was my dad's the superhero on really helping me align my vision on. I took no venture, so I just had to bootstrap it all the way. My dad gave me my first pre-seed of 10K to get started, see if it's viable
Big
or not. It
money.
turned out to
Yeah.
be viable. Yeah. So right out of high school, that was big money, but it grew out, and that there were periods where it was really tough not taking venture. And the reason why I didn't take venture is it was hard to find. I don't think OST was big back then, but it was. I don't know if it even existed back then, but there was no ideologically aligned, venture firm, and they were not too keen on the open source drone stuff too. Most of the VCs I talked to, they're like, "Yeah, that's a terrible idea," but I was like, "I wanted to," and we did it, and nothing bad happened. In
Yeah.
fact, more good things happened. Yeah.
Good for you. Just to be clear, you didn't wind up going to college?
No, I did not.
Beautiful. Well, the Peter Thiel crowd will be very happy to hear your path.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did try that path too early on. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not surprised about the VC thing. There's a lot of like cosplay out there. As someone told us recently, it's a primer company, and the guy told us like I think he said we were the first people he's talked to in 6 months where he didn't have to explain what a primer is.
Hmm.
I was like, the bar is just so low to be kind of even like anywhere in this space. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah,
What's
I
the
mean,
yeah?
sorry,
Go ahead.
go ahead. Oh, okay. So quick thing is like I realized that gap quickly because I grew up on firearms, and I think that really morphed my like ideological principle. But when I would bring up guns and in the tech space, like the default term was like assault weapon or assault rifle, and I was like, oh, okay,
Right.
okay. Yeah.
Yes, but that's the assault drone is a feature, not a bug.
Yes.
David, just on that thread, you can answer this as you wish. How far along are you on the M4 enabled drone?
No comment.
Okay, fine. I know.
This is actually I think that at some point, probably soon, the NFA becomes a problem for
Hmm.
for drones.
No, why? I mean, if you can make you can either you can go register an SBR.
You'd have to SBR your drone.
No, you SBR the gun, just the frame, right? The
Yeah.
serialized part. And then how you implement that serialized part once the serialized part is on whatever, who cares, right?
Well, that's where the FAA comes in again.
Oh,
They
right.
do regulate like weaponization of unmanned systems too. So if you there was actually a guy who put a Glock on a quadcopter. I think he got a knock from the feds. He went to jail, and then like they again passed another rule within the agency saying, hey, you can't do that.
Wow.
Sadly.
Okay. I didn't know it was an FAA thing too. That's crazy. Is there a way around it, or you need, I guess, a special license or?
So I've talked to I don't know the legal details, but there's ways around it if you're doing it for like specific federal, defense related development. Like SIG they have a whole division making quadcopters with the handgun built in. I don't think people know about that. I think they do show it at like some trade events sometimes, but and there's several other companies doing that, so it's definitely possible. It's a little complicated though.
We need a 07 SOT for FAA, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they would even if the FAA wasn't an issue, I think they would come after it as a machine gun, because like even if it's not full auto, the whole thing of like one pull of the trigger per, or one round per function of the trigger. I think the idea of telling a drone, I guess, unless you're sitting there with the controller being like bang, 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 bang,
It
but
depends if
anything
it's
beyond that would, I think they would come after it as a
I
machine gun.
think an FFL did tell me that there are regulations to remotely engage, like you can't, if you put like a servo to pull the trigger with the remote control, you can get in trouble just for that, at least from what I heard.
Wow.
Um, I don't
hmm,
know the legal details, but that's at least what I heard. Someone needs to verify that. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, Sadly unsurprising. Um, so we talked a little earlier about like kind of early uses. You're seeing Genesis as the first product. I don't know if you want to talk about or can talk about any products coming after Genesis, but like if so, please do. But if not, generally, what do you like? Where is the civilian market going? Is it well, I'll just leave it there. Where is the civilian market going, do you think?
I think I th- maybe I'm in an echo chamber from X, but I think there are more people in the 2A space who want to merge technology in. Like I don't think there's a clear roadmap. I do think that the clear roadmap is okay. Most gun owners will have drones for ISR, right? But in terms of what can we do with this technology, I mean, even the military is still learning. It's just it's the open road for the civilian space, and I want to support that with whatever product we can that can also pipeline to military units that need it, civilians that can experiment. Kind of that's the model I'm going for. In terms of future products, I can talk on Dragon SDR drone. That's exciting. That's basically it's built around the SDR software defined radio. So it's a basically EW platform. So we're putting a NVIDIA Jetson Orin as the compute module, put it just commercial off the shelf SDR. It's going to be open source too. And it's just doing spectrum, spectrum mapping, spectrum analysis, and reading it. I'm working with another guy. He goes by C-Max Executor online. I won't say his real identity on here, but he is developing what's called Dragon OS, which is basically like an SDR operating system that's also open source. So like why that's so interesting is um, once you do spectrum surveillance from the air, there's a lot of limitations that are gone, which is like you're no longer constrained by line of sight. You can really get up there, pick up more signals. You can also do like heat mapping on RF sources by flying in a grid line. You can do all kinds of cool stuff. And this is kind of the commercial off the shelf technologies are there. It just hasn't been implemented to something that's commercially available outside of the defense space. And I think it's going to, as one of our next products, it's going to be really interesting what the community does with it, what people do with it.
That's so interesting to hear you say, because I think there are two areas that just feel like they're like very early, but they're just these like bubbling cauldrons of like people doing cool stuff in the kind of civilian defense adjacent space, and it's drones and radios.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, super cool to combine them. What do you think about like networked? Maybe it's just kind of like a bias from the status quo. We think of drones as, I own a drone, or like I own three drones and they do what I want. Um, how do you think that scales to like all my neighbors own drones and maybe we have some sort of like neighborhood situation, or drones across the city talking to one another, um, communicating, etc., like kind of scaling the impact that and benefits I get from a drone beyond just the drone like I own, to like the existence of a network of drones. Are you seeing anything around that?
like again, sadly, that's what we see in the defense enterprise sector. I think with like the drone first responder concept, where they're gonna have drones in boxes in cities, and the drones are all networked with each other, right? Um, that could actually be a really interesting pipeline to the civilian space. Definitely, these companies are not interested in that, but I think we could, if we see the merging of open source, networking projects with drones, and there's more work in the, I would say the democratized like operating system that we all agree on. There can be a really cool concept of where the drone is more like our phone, right? It's software defined um, end effect really. It's like it's the physical body for the software network, communication network. And I think there is a lot of room to grow for that. I mean, we may even see, this kind of sounds crazy, but community drone swarms could be possible, right? Where, okay, one guy can't own a drone swarm. You have to have the capital and resource level of the military. But if a community has a lot of land, let's say, and they want to protect it, and if each person has a drone they individually use, and they want to team it together intelligently. I mean, it's all really up to what software developments we see, and software developments are just going to advance and get easier as time goes. So, really, it's an open road for innovation and development. And as you can probably tell, like all of this is still very early. Nothing's been really consolidated. It's still just, it went from like college guys experimenting to weaponization in such a short period of time. We really don't know what we're gonna do with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Would the if the Ukraine war hadn't happened, would we be like years behind? How much innovation did that pull forward?
Um, that's a good question. I didn't think about that. If Ukraine never happened, I don't think we'll see the same implementation of like I think what Ukraine broke is, even with drones, like if you saw the transition on, as we have group three systems, group two, group one, like that's the size classification, right? So you go to group one, it's like the small stuff, like here, right? If you see how the military, the US military specifically was deploying these, they were still treating it like um, kind of like air. So like if you look at the way Predator drones, Reaper drones were utilized here, more like literally aircraft that were unmanned is kind of how they were used. And then these smaller systems were kind of utilized in the same way. Um, in my opinion, at least from my assessment, maybe my perspective is wrong, but Ukraine saw kind of like the super democratized, decentralized. There's no rules. This is desperate. How can we maximize the capabilities of this? They have destructive end effect. I think we saw that like just hyper accelerate. So if Ukraine never happened, I think there would still be, the drone space would still be pretty, quite frankly, pretty bland. I mean, it was bland, pretty kind of bland before Ukraine, which is it was cool navigation stuff, cool college papers, cool experimentation, and while we got a camera in the air surveying this area, but that was really about it for
Yeah,
a
it would have
while.
been the hot thing would be like just drone delivery and kind of
Yep.
municipal use and convenience use. But Ukraine really lit the fuse for military tactical use.
Yeah. Um, well, cool, David. Thanks for all this. Where can people go to stay updated on what you're up to?
If you want to see our crazy, sometimes edgy community engagements from our company, it's on X. The fun is on X at so it's at K9 Defense Tech. That's our tag. You can follow my personal accounts for my personal hot takes sometimes, progress sharing, and then yeah, I think our biggest stuff are basically our existence is on X, but you can also visit k9defense.tech. That's our website where we'll have more drone options available. We also have a wiki page linked on our website, so you can learn more on building your own drone, build your own Genesis if you want at home, and we'll have more resources available to the community. So,
Okay. Awesome. David Hahn Jr. of Canine Defense Tech. Thank you very much.
Thanks for
David.
having me.